Chairman, we're up.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's Tuesday, November 10th staff meeting to catch up on a couple of items. Reminder that we are having a special meeting later on today at 1:30 p.m. So with that, welcome everybody that's watching, and I'll hand the meeting over to introduce Manager Tom Stoltz.
Good morning, Chairman, and thank you. Good morning, Commission. Kate, I'm looking at you. Are we going to do something for veterans to start this off? Very good. A couple of items today. Chairman, I want Kate to start the meeting, though, to talk about some Veterans Day celebrations, and then I'll be back up.
Okay. Good morning, Kate. Welcome, as always.
All right, good morning, Commissioners. So tomorrow is Veterans Day, so the county's offices will be closed, but I wanted to highlight a few items for Commissioners this morning. At 9 a.m., we will have a dock flyover at I-235 and Central. At 10 a.m., there is a salute to veterans at the dock hangar. And at 11 a.m., there's a veterans ceremony at Veterans Park here in Wichita, which is at 339 Veterans Parkway. So just want to highlight those three events here. And I know that the Wichita Eagle has also put a comprehensive list of Veterans Day activities on their website as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Chairman and Commission, we have two items for the staff discussion this morning. One is the legislative platform continued discussion that we started a couple of weeks ago. And then Chris Labrum is here to talk about the National Electric Code, which we have a public hearing coming up, and he wants to give an overview of the code that will take about 15-20 minutes from his end. This morning on legislative platform discussion, which we'll go through first, as we discussed last week, Mr. Papoon and Mr. Ashford have compiled a listing, a grocery list of all of the legislative items that commissioners and or staff has brought up. And last count, I think it was 16 or 17. And the purpose of the meeting today is just to go have Akeem take us through that list and ask any legal or technical questions that commissioners may have. And
can I have a list of? Can I have that list?
Yeah.
Is there a way to email that out or share the screen so that we can all see what we're talking about?
In her Kate's Commissioner Cruz, Kate is saying it's in your email inbox. While we're having this discussion, we have a number of people on the phone in case there's technical questions about any of these listings of items. So, and of course, Mike is here to talk about any legal issue that any of those may have. So the goal for today is just to get through that list, talk about technical or legal questions, and then on the Wednesday meeting on November the 18th, we will bring that list back for you and vote on it. And the commission at that time as a body will make decisions on what goes on the platform, how it goes on the platform, is it priority, secondary issue. And then I think during that time also, Tony will present a couple of different template models that you can consider, and we'll try to make some hard and fast decisions on that November 18th meeting. So with that, I will turn it over to Akeem or Mike or whoever wants it.
Morning, Akeem.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners.
Before you start, is there any way that we can see the boardroom?
I think what they're gonna have to look on Facebook to see what's happening in the boardroom.
Commissioner Dennis, from what I'm hearing, that you're going to have to look on Facebook if you have that capability to actually see what's going on.
Why don't we just reschedule this till you can get it straightened out? Thank you. I can't believe we can't get to the point with technology, but we schedule a board meeting and we can't even see what's going on.
Well, Kate,
I have to say I'm kind of with him too, because sitting on our chair, it's like all we see is Sedgwick County. I thought this was going to be all remote, which is why I asked the question earlier today. If I'd known I could have come into the office, I would have come in, but I was told to not come in.
Well, Commissioner Howell, I didn't talk to anybody, but Commissioner Howell showed up, and I personally have about a laundry list of items that I have to have printed off and reviewed during the day as this day goes on. So I chose to come in myself and work in my office. So that's why I'm here. Kate, could you, by chance, pull up this on a screenshot, and would it help? If would that help Commissioner Cruz and Commissioner Dennis? If not, we can adjourn and do it later. Either way, I respect whatever. If you don't want to,
I mean, that's helpful, but it just seems
Okay.
very,
all right.
I mean, we couldn't see anything at all, so.
How do you share the screen?
How is that, Commissioner Dennis?
As long as we can see who's talking and we can participate, but just seeing a deal that says Sedgwick County and hopefully picking up what they're talking about is not acceptable. So I'm hoping that we can get our stuff together and make sure that everyone participates equally. Thank you.
Can they not see this?
Commissioner, the webcam should be on and pointed at the bench. Or if you would rather, we can turn it to the podium.
We can see ourselves as well, and we could go back and forth between the podium and ourselves, if that helps you all.
I guess I'm just not sure if we all have the capability to do it from our offices, why we wouldn't do it from, I mean, so that we're all on a level playing field. It seems very discombobulated how it is right now.
I just know when I was on quarantine, I was at home and you all were on the bench, so I just followed the same protocol.
That's true. You were home for 3 weeks,
21 days, I sat there and did this.
21 days.
So Commissioner Cruz, can you not see the bench? Can you not see the chairman and Commissioner?
I can, but I can't see you, Akeem. If you're going to be going through all
can
these
now.
16 legislative items, I'd like to see you.
Can you see him now?
Do we need to go up there? Mike and I? Mike, do you want to come up there with me?
Akeem, maybe you could just sit at one of the chairs here.
I'm going to be presenting a lot of it, probably, just because King doesn't have the history with some of these issues, but do whatever you want.
Mike, can you come up and sit here, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Chairman, let's take a 10-minute recess and we'll all zoom in. You guys will go to your office and zoom in. The team will zoom in from his office.
Okay. We'll take a 10-minute recess and we'll all zoom in. And so we'll join by Zoom in 10 minutes.
There's no.
Go back to the meeting. Did you close it now?
Okay, so we're alive. Are we good?
Linda may still have to call in because she's lost power down in her building. It's muted right now, but. Do we have folks on the line?
Reminder, this is just, we're getting all these, if anybody has any questions, details about one of the issues, we're not really voting on anything yet. That will be done on the 18th.
Correct, Chairman.
Kind of a, maybe even an up-down vote on each item. So staff looks like is here to answer any questions. So we can just go through, start at the beginning.
Could did anybody send this link to Mark Bennett by any chance?
I did. I forwarded it to him.
Okay, thank you. So, you want me to start out on this, or do you want to?
That's fine, Mike. Yeah, that'd be
Okay.
fine.
Okay, going through the proposed platform issues that we sent out. Many of them, some of them we've talked about before, some of them were on last year's platform, and we just wanted to go over them again. The first one has to do with the mental and behavioral health issues. The change on this that I've made since we talked about it last week was we added the support for a regionalized state mental health facility in Sedgwick County as the fourth bullet point there. That issue was raised by Commissioner Dennis, and I talked with the sheriff, and sheriff can weigh in, but he feels very strongly about this issue as well, being a priority issue for Sedgwick County. So that's the first one.
Okay.
Nuisance Abatement Authority is the bill we had last year that passed the Senate and then got derailed by COVID. That's the second issue. Third issue is the Charter Commission, support a legislation allowing Sedgwick County as an urban area to establish a charter commission specific to Sedgwick County. That was Senate Bill 406 last year, which again passed through the Senate. It got passed by a 31-day vote and then got derailed by COVID and didn't get through the legislature. So those three have been priority issues. The fourth issue is just a statement to support legislation or state funding for expansion of broadband access in Sedgwick County. This was an issue I think brought forward by Commissioner Dennis, and anybody wants to talk about this briefly or wants any explanation, we can.
Mike, can I, the state's just working on expanding broadband all around the state, aren't they? Do we know that? Don't know. Okay.
I don't have any specific information about that right now, Commissioner.
Okay.
Chairman.
All right. I thought maybe that's part of even the spark money, but I don't know. Okay. We can move on.
Okay.
Well, Chairman, I have a question. Hey, Commissioner Dennis, can you explain this? Like, what exactly? I mean, so is there a certain legislation that we need to be supporting? Was there one last year that didn't get through? Can you kind of expand?
Certainly. What this is just as it says, is to support any kind of legislation or state funding to expand the broadband, because we have a significant problem in my district and in Commissioner O'Donnell's district. I think probably any of you that have rural areas in your district, you're facing the same problems with COVID. Our students are not in school. They're trying to do their homework from home, and they don't have access to broadband. That is a significant problem. I don't know if you saw the article in the Eagle just a day or two ago about the problems that our rural families are experiencing. So I have talked to my representative, Joe Sywert, who is the chairman of the broadband, will support any kind of program that comes before his committee. But right now, I don't know that there is a big push. There's a lot of people talking about it, but I don't know that there's any legislation that is being pushed forward. But if there is, we need to make sure that our lobbyists are right on top of it to make sure that we have broadband provided to our rural areas. Thank you.
Is that something that we could talk to our lobbyist about to see if he has heard anything on the horizon, if there's something specific that someone's working on? Because I understand the problem. I'm fully aware of it. I just wonder what specific piece of legislation would we be supporting if there was one already written?
I know that the governor has got some type of legislation that she's been looking at. I don't know if it's been presented in a form of a bill right now. But when I talked to Representative Sowert actually last Tuesday night, he said that the governor was doing something there. So I don't know exactly what the bill looks like, if there is one.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no more discussion on that, the next matter I think was brought up by Commissioner Howe, and it's the vote. It has to do with the bill that was adopted 2 sessions ago that would allow citizens to vote at any polling place on election day in Sedgwick County. As you remember, that bill passed the legislature, but included in it the fact that the Secretary of State would have to promulgate rules and regulations before it came into effect. As of now, the Secretary of State hasn't adopted those regulations, but I think we've had some assurances from him that they're going to begin working on that. They just wanted to get through the 2020 election cycle, which, as everybody understands, was quite a ordeal for many election officers and such. But anyway, that's that vote. I don't know if Commissioner Howe wants to say anything.
Well, this is permissive legislation. It doesn't mandate any county has to do anything. This just allows a county that has the technology set up. It allows us to implement this provision. So it should not be it's not going to be a problem for a county that doesn't want to participate or doesn't have the technology.
Well, the Vote Anywhere bill is already passed. Maybe that's what's somewhat confusing here. It's just, are we going to support legislation that last year there was legislation that essentially required the Secretary of State to promulgate the regulations or allow the vote to go ahead and happen, the Vote Anywhere to happen. Are we going to let the Secretary of State go ahead and do the regulations, or are we going to add this to the platform? That seems to be the issue for this year, and we obviously don't have to decide today, but think about it before next year.
I'll just say this: he's on record saying he would get this in place before the 2021 election cycle. We ought to ask his office if he still plans to do that. I think if he is committed to that already, then we don't need this piece of legislation. But if he, for some reason, is going to push this off, then I think that we need to basically force the issue just a little bit. So we ought to reach out to his office and find out what his commitment is on implementing these rules and regulations.
Okay. Item 6, and District Attorney Mark Bennett's on the line, can discuss this, but we wanted to give some sort of a supportive statement in favor of allowing the district attorney more leeway in dealing with the statutes involving speedy trial. Mark, do you want to say something?
Sure. There's several efforts afoot right now, but no bill has been generated, but we're talking with the revisers about trying to have something put together. And now that the election's over with, we can talk to the leadership in both chambers and see about, what their temperature is on some of the various options. One would be to simply suspend speedy trial for the next 18 months, 2 years, something to give us a chance to work down all the backlog. The other would be to get rid of statutory speedy trial altogether, like many states do, and simply let the Constitution control. There's piles of cases concerning constitutional speedy trial, but we're going to find out. I mean, frankly, I think everybody understands there's an issue right now. The question is how to do it. So once I have a bill number, once I know exactly what the plan is. I'll let Mike know, and he can let you folks know if you want to have it be something that is a priority for your lobbyists. But I think every county in the state, frankly, every jurisdiction in the United States, and my guess is around the world, is dealing with, how to handle the cases that come before the courts in their various jurisdictions. So Kansas just happens to have a unique statutory speedy trial provision, which has had to be suspended and needs to continue to be suspended. My concern is the legislature tied it to the governor's emergency powers, which frankly politicized it. And I'd like to extricate that from the politics of it. And let's just let the courts and let the Supreme Court tell us how to do our business. And we'll, like we always do, and we'll follow that. So that's the gist of what I think is coming down the pike.
So Mark, would it help if you want us to, you're requesting that we keep this on our agenda to support this?
I think, let's put it this way, I'd like to, supportive, when it comes time, for this conferees and whatnot, I think it'd be nice if the Association of Counties and the various, especially Sedgwick and Johnson counties, let the legislators know that you support the effort. So yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You bet.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'll move on, and this is something that the sheriff and the district attorney may also want to weigh in, and that is Commissioner Howell issue dealing with getting some kind of reform to the suspended driver's license issue. There was a bill last year, I believe it's Senate Bill 275, that was going through the legislature before COVID, and my understanding in talking with the sheriff is that they support the language as that bill is currently was written back last year. And I think the district attorney has also been involved with some task force in dealing with this issue. And any of the three of you want to discuss this, but
I can tell you that just yesterday, the Criminal Justice Reform Commission met for 3.5 hours. And we have 6 subcommittees. We went through the first 3. We have 3 more to go over later this month, and a report that's due to the legislature December 1st. But top 5 items I think that were discussed yesterday, we passed to make a formal recommendation that bill or some permutation of the same be run up again. I think you have to start with a new bill this year, if I'm not mistaken.
You have to start with a new bill, but I was just going to just point out that last year the Sheriff's Association and the Chiefs of Police actually provided opposition testimony to Senate Bill 275. So I don't know what it would take to get their support, but last year it wasn't going to happen with their support. But it was a very, very popular bill, and it actually passed one of the houses. And I really do think something's going to pass this year.
The original bill that was presented, we weren't in agreement with. Once everybody sat down and started making tweaks to it, we did agree to it, but it never went any further.
So I think the bill is going to get legs again this year. And I'm sure that if they've already got a framework from last year that Ed Klump and the folks at the various police and sheriff's associations could support, I have any reason to believe it wouldn't be supported this year. So again, I think the request would be that Sedgwick County and Association of Counties, et cetera, get behind whatever the bill turns out to be. Once we get a bill number, we'll share that, and you guys can let your lobbyists know. But I think everybody recognizes that this is an issue that Commissioner Howell mentioned. It's an issue that a lot of folks agree with. It's just more of making sure we do it the right way.
Just a point of reference, we have about 60,000 or even maybe more suspended drivers in Sedgwick County. And a lot of these folks are continuing to drive without insurance, trying to pay their child support or put food on the table. And we need something that's positive. It gets these folks back behind the wheel legally, a restricted license of some sort, waiving of some fees to get them back, and a legal status is important. And right now the fees rack up so quickly that when someone gets down that rabbit hole, they can never get back out, and that's the problem. So we need to throw our weight behind this, because this has been a festering issue for many, many years, and it's actually getting worse.
Can we verify the numbers that Commissioner Howell just said? 60,000 seems awfully high when we've got 500,000 people in Sedgwick County, and a lot of those are not driving because they're not even of age to drive. So I'd like a little validation on the 60,000 number. Thank you.
Yeah, I do know the Eagle did a report where they got with Department of Revenue last year, and the number was over 50,000.
KWCH has done numerous stories on this, and they're reporting numbers about that number. So
that's for the entire state, or
that's just
for
Sedgwick County only.
Okay.
So you're saying 10% of all people in Sedgwick County have a suspended driver's license today?
That is why this is an urgent issue, and we have got some criminal justice reform. This is the kind of reform that we really need to.
But when we decide, when we figure how many people aren't even of age to drive, and you're saying 10% of the total population has a suspended driver's license, that just is not realistic. Surely someone knows who's got suspended driver's license, and we can get an accurate number.
Right. The Kansas Department of Revenue keeps those stats. We can check with them and get an updated number, but it's available. And KWCH has done this numerous times. We've had lots of reports on this, and continues to be around that number for Sedgwick County. And I guess, we all know someone who's had a fender bender somewhere, and the person that caused the accident just takes off, hit and run. And I think that people are, they're driving on suspended licenses, and they are worried about getting caught. And that's the type of behavior that happens. I think them getting insurance is very challenging if they don't have a valid driver's license that allows them to drive. They're not driving. They're driving without insurance, and so this is just a snowball issue. And I know it sounds hard to believe, but this number has been validated numerous times. It has to be dealt with somehow.
The original bill, I will tell you, was not doable, and the reason being is that people without insurance. The bill was calling for their license not to be suspended. Well, there's way too many people out there that get into accidents that the other folks don't have insurance, and it's all on the person that didn't cause the accident. So that's, like I said, we sat down, the KSA sat down with Senator Goudreau and worked out a lot of those issues. And at this point, we just met last week on our legislative agenda, and as long as the bill stays the way it was written at the end of the process, we will support it, because there is a lot of things that go on, such as people are paying their fines, but their license stays suspended. Well, if they're paying their fines, their license needs to not be suspended so they can get to work to pay their fines. And those type of things. People not paying child support, which some folks have a different issue with. But if they can't get to their job to pay their child support because their license is suspended and they actually have a job, there's other ways to do that through garnishment and not suspending license.
Yeah, I do agree. This is an issue that we should really strongly consider. I know that the numbers are overwhelming, but I have to agree with Commissioner Howell. I mean, it's important because they're alarming. So let's get some validation of those numbers so that we have all commissioners, understanding the facts of the situation. But I do think that this is something very important to deal with.
Yeah, one correction: it was KW. It was Cake TV. Pilar Pedraza did the story. I apologize for saying the wrong station.
Okay, we can draw up a supportive position on dealing with reform of the suspended driver's license, but obviously until a bill is actually drafted, until we hear the sheriff weigh in and all the commissioners weigh in, we won't necessarily be in a position to support a specific bill until we get all the information we need. But we'll go ahead and draft a supportive position on that. Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you, District Attorney Mr. Bennett. And
thank you.
Property tax bill, another issue brought by Commissioner Howell. This would be a support by the commission for a position. Last session, Senate Bill 294 was the bill that would ultimately do away with the property tax lid, but didn't allow a municipality to raise their or levy more taxes from one year to the next without giving everyone notice, written notice of the same, and you would have to have a public hearing. Didn't allow for any growth or any increase in your budget at all, but it did do away with the property tax lid. And I think at least last year, the Kansas Association of Counties opposed this bill. It's just a matter of whether we want to take it, but we know this bill legislation is probably going to come forward again this session. It's a matter of whether the commission wants to take a position on it.
Can we speak to pros and cons of this?
Lindsay's not on here. Lindsay would be the appropriate person to probably talk about it. One of the pros is they do away with the tax lid. The cons is you couldn't adjust for cost of living increases. You couldn't your budget can't go up from one year to the next without going through the loops of spending, I don't know, probably around $15,000 or more, giving written notice in some fashion, whether it's postcards or letters or whatever, to all the citizens in the county or the taxpayers in the county, and then having a public hearing to allow people to come and complain about the tax, support the tax increase or complain about the tax increase.
And you said the Kansas Association of Counties is not in favor of this?
They opposed it last year. I'd have to look at their platform this year to see if they've taken a position on this. The Kansas Association of Counties general position, and they probably haven't taken a position specifically about a bill that's no longer active because all these bills died after the last session. But the Kansas Association of Counties has generally taken the position they're opposed to tax lid, and they're opposed to any kind of regulation on the county commissioners adopting their budgets, with the idea the county commissioners are wise enough to make their own budget decisions and don't need the legislature to put artificial caps on. So I'd be shocked if the Kansas Association of Counties supports this bill. But
as I recall, last year we supported it with some amendments that we wanted to make to the bill. Such things as not having to send out the postcards or the letters, whatever it was that was required, and that we could use other means with social media, with newspapers and so forth. So we need to go back and make sure that my memory is correct, but if it was, we need to resurrect those things that we would like tweaked on the bill, but I still think that we need to support it with some tweaks. Thank you.
Okay. If there's nothing more on that.
I'd like to pipe up. The idea that we're going to use electronic communication to notify taxpayers in lieu of a mailing, I think that's going to probably come across as opposition. They will not see that as proponent testimony. The whole point of this is trying to be more transparent with taxpayers and letting them know, here's what's going to happen with your property tax next year. Here's kind of our plan, and giving people an invitation, if you will, to respond in a couple of opportunities. And although we can communicate through a website or social media or other electronic means, maybe even a newspaper, a lot of people don't see those things. I think the most compelling argument for this, if it was a little bit less than $1 to notify a property taxpayer what's about to happen to their property tax, most people would be very glad to pay that. And I think it's going to be a baked-in cost. I don't think our property taxes are not going to see higher revenues from year to year, even if we were to lower the mill levy rate because of assessed valuation increases. The dollars will likely go up slowly, and this is based on the dollars, not on the mill levy. And so most likely it's going to be a baked-in cost of notifying taxpayers from year to year what's going to happen to the property taxes. But having said that, I think it's worth the money. And I think people do support the idea of transparency and communication. So I think this is going to pass. Karen Tyson did get reelected, and this is probably top of her list. She pushed it hard last year, and it basically moved all the way through the legislature until the session stopped early. So I have no doubt this will come back, probably in the form that it was the final form that it got to at the end of last year's session. So, thank you.
Lindsay, would you mind piping up about this, please? I think that you, can you please talk to it from a financial standpoint?
Sure. So I think the bill that we saw last year has a little bit of a different lens on it this year because of the change with our general obligation debt. So last year we had some concerns that the current property tax lid restricts our ability to do certain types of bonding, new bonding, public building commission bonding. So if we were to do an EMS post or things like that, we had thought that that was going to be a barrier. Now that that has changed due to the charter resolution that we expect to become effective in mid-December, that particular obstacle has been removed. So I think the concern is what Mike has already outlined and what commissioners have already discussed, and that is there is nothing built in for cities potentially that take on additional property, or if the fire district grows, there is nothing that allows for change in use. A lot of those default changes that have been built into the property tax law for a long time are eliminated through this bill. And so even if it went up $1, we're in a position to send out a mailing that's, I think Mike said, roughly $150,000 is the expected cost for that to do a countywide mailer. We also had some concerns about the calendar, the timeline, because it would push us into potentially not being able to know what your budget is until October. And also had some issues with how quickly we can turn around the certified budget after you all adopt a budget, particularly if there are some changes. So those are kind of the pros and cons. The pros are there's no more property tax lid, and you're able to have as much discretion as you want as long as you give that public hearing. We also need to reconcile that public hearing component, whether it is on this particular property tax lid or if it's the budget itself. And so that would be something to reconcile as well. So does that kind of answer your question, Commissioner Cruz?
Yeah, so is it your recommendation to go ahead with this and put this on our platform, or what would be your recommendation as our CFO?
I don't know that I have a strong recommendation one way or the other, as long as we're able to recoup costs for this mailer from other entities. It should be relatively cost neutral. I think there are some good components about public notice. I think if, and I don't know how Commissioner Howell would feel about this, but I think trying to do something via the web as opposed to just a mailer would be good. So I think with some adjustments, it could be pretty workable. I don't love it as is.
Let me say a couple things. First of all, I think that estimate may be high. I'd like to have someone verify that estimate on costs. We talk about an entire countywide election being less than that. I think would cost less than that. So to do a one-way communication, notifying property taxpayers of the tax change for their property, I have a hard time understanding how we get to $150,000. But so I'd like to have someone verify that. But secondly, let me just say I have a correction. This bill actually did pass to the governor. It was vetoed by the governor, but it passed the legislature with pretty good numbers, and it was somewhat bipartisan. It was on which sort of process you look at, but I would say somewhat bipartisan. I would also say the idea of using the web to notify taxpayers, I don't agree with that. I think the whole point of this is that taxpayers need to have more awareness of what's going on. And one thing I actually like about this is it actually separates each jurisdiction with a clear notice of what your property taxes have been over time, so people understand that jurisdiction. I think one of the problems we have right now is people see their tax bill and they don't know which jurisdiction changed their taxes, and they get mad at basically every jurisdiction because they assume it's everyone. Let me also remind everyone that the property tax lid passed in 2015. It wasn't really workable, and so in 2016, Sedgwick County led to fix the problems. And I think if we wanted to focus on this bill and say we realize it's likely to pass. In fact, we have veto-proof Again, it doesn't mean everyone's going to vote for it, but it's possible that it'd be veto-proof this year. And having said that, I think knowing that it's likely to pass, our position should be, let's focus on the problems in the bill. You talk about it's unworkable, just like we did in 2016. We led and identified the unworkable issues of the tax lid, and we improved the legislation, we improved the dates and the requirements of what the tax lid did. We didn't focus on trying to repeal it, which is what the KAC and LKM actually tried to do, was just repeal the tax lid. Well, I understand it passed very bipartisan, and it wasn't likely to be repealed. We focused on the problems, and I think that's what we should do in this case. Let's focus on the unworkable aspects of what's been proposed. Well, actually, what passed the governor last year. Let's focus on that, but substantially support the bill. I think that's what we should do, and offer solutions, if you will.
I think I'm just going to need a little bit more time on it. I'm not quite there yet. It's kind of complicated, and I just like a little bit more time.
Okay, one of the reasons we're presenting it all today and giving you time to chew on it for about a week is so we can do that very thing. We're not voting on anything today, and any additional information, we'll try to get that to you before next Wednesday. The next item is taking a position on Medicaid expansion. It's a very volatile political issue in this state. I know at least a couple of commissioners have diametrically opposed positions on this. I don't know whether we want to leave this as a state issue or county take a position, but Commissioner Howell wanted this on the platform.
I do.
So is there a way to put it to bed as to whether we want to support it or not? Because we keep talking about it, but I just don't think it's wise to take a position on something that we have a negative position on. I mean, why would we want to talk about it? Especially when our top issues on page 1 are all about mental health. I don't see how you can support mental health without Medicaid expansion.
I think you can, because I think it's unrelated issues, but I would say the way to resolve this is when we get into a BOCC meeting, somebody should make a motion to support or oppose Medicaid expansion as a platform issue, and let's vote. We can't do that right now.
Right.
I think that's the way to resolve this. I have many talking points about why I believe my position is correct. I'm sure you have lots of data about why you think your position is correct. Nevertheless, every governing body and many cities, many counties, and many other organizations have spoken to this. I think for us not to speak to it would be strangely absent. We need to speak to it. It has a huge impact on our state's finances, possibly shifting money away from mental health towards health care for people who have other options. I think this actually adds burden to the state. That money might become available to us for mental health, but this is going to be in competition with that. I think there's many reasons why we should clarify our position of opposition. I think that I would be glad to get into those points anytime. But the way to resolve this is let's if we have a disagreement amongst the commissioners, let's just vote on it when we have a BOCC meeting. That's the way to resolve that. I'll offer my points at that time. Thank you.
Before we move on, I'll also point out that the number 4 position for the Kansas Association of Counties is to support expansion of Medicaid, just for the commission's edification. Moving on to ballot order, another Commissioner Howell issue about arranging ballots such that the contested races are at the top of the ballot and non-contested races at the bottom. I'll let Commissioner Howell talk about that.
So once again, if you voted by machine, it probably was more noticeable this election cycle. For example, when you get some races weren't contested, and that's fine. But when you get down to the judges, just for example, it was I think 15 pages where you could select one candidate or do a write-in, and then you had to click the next page. And so a lot of people get to that part of the ballot and they just get tired of it and they don't want to continue on. They don't know if there's going to be anything else at the end of the ballot. I mean, maybe it's a time issue, maybe it's just an indifference. They don't care, but maybe they don't realize there's other things to vote on that are contested. this has been one of those things where if you look at the top of the ballot and the bottom of the ballot, you'll see what we call voter drop-offs. And one way to possibly just communicate more clearly to the voter that there are contested things that your vote will make a difference between different candidates or whatever, to move those issues to the top of the ballot that are contested. And contested means you have got more than one candidate for the same position. And the things where there's only one candidate, you move them down the ballot. Now, I would still want to keep things in the same order in terms of high-level offices to low-level offices, for example. That's fine, but I would move everything that's contested above, if you will, a line in the ballot, and then below that would be everything that's uncontested. And again, priority order of highest office to lowest office. But this would be one way to help voters not, hit voter fatigue, if you will, of having to go through, I don't know how many pages there were, 35 pages on the machine, whatever it was. A lot of different pages, and there was actually no choice between two different people, for example. So this is something we talked about canvassing last year, one of the previous elections. I think we talked about this at canvassing numerous times. So with that in mind, I think this is something we ought to highlight this. We probably ought to find out if the Secretary of State would support this or not. But I have talked to the some of the folks that are on the elections committee, and they're interested in the bill. And I think we ought to have it on there because it helps voters know that there's important things to vote on, and that you don't have to go clear to the end of the ballot to find them.
Can we validate how many pages? He said 30 to 40 pages on a voting machine. Can we validate that? And also, can we validate how many people dropped off? Like how many ballots were cast, and then how many ballots weren't fully filled out on a machine? Is there a way to get that information?
So the election office can provide that. I have no doubt.
Yeah, I think that would be good information to have, to see if this is something that we should pursue, given light that we have close to 18 things that we're considering here.
Well,
Tom, is that something you could help me get, or somebody?
certainly we can talk to the election officer, Commissioner. I'm sure they've got quite a bit of other things going on right now, I believe. But I'm sure that they would be the ones to give us the information. I would suggest, just as a procedure, and Akeem may want to weigh in on this or not, or the manager or somebody, but before we seriously consider putting issues on our platform, there ought to be some sort of vetting process. Has this issue ever been brought up by anybody else? Has the Secretary of State's office been contacted? Is there going to be any serious opposition to this, serious support of it? I mean, just to throw something out without that kind of vetting process, I think, does a disservice to the commission, not having all that information. But anyway, we can certainly check with Secretary of State's office, see if they have a position on it or if it's ever been raised before.
And get the information that I requested as far as drop-offs, number of pages on the ballot on a voting machine.
I will request that information.
Thank you.
Okay, the next items, number of Department of Corrections issues, and Correctional Department Head Glenda Martin is here. I think 3 of them were on last year's other issues of importance, but 2 of them are newer issues, and I'll let Glenda speak to these issues.
Good morning, Commissioners. Can you hear me?
Yes. I can hear you.
Okay, great. So the first one, the executive realignment order. So last year, the governor tried to really move juvenile services from KDOC to a new service called the Kansas Department of Human Services. And that would have pulled juvenile services from the Kansas Department of Juvenile Services over to another entity, which would have also included the Department of Children and Families. The legislature opposed that realignment, and I would just propose that we oppose any realignment that looks like that. That's not a good plan
for our juvenile programs. And I have a list of many reasons why, but they don't really deal with juvenile justice systems. And keeping them under the same department will benefit our programs. As directors across the state, we all opposed that because we felt like it was a move to really sweep funds from the juvenile justice system into DCF. So that's just one issue with the realignment. The second is to oppose the governor at the very end of the session also tried to sweep juvenile justice funds. And again, she was trying to sweep about $40 million. That would have affected Sedgwick County in a very big way because we receive the regional and reinvestment dollars. That's close to about $90,000. And also the evidence-based program funds, which we received last year, that's about $760,000. And so we would not want to have her sweeping any of our juvenile funds. And if you'll remember, these are the funds that were created after they closed all the YRC2 placements. And this was the funds they collected. And so it was supposed to go back by legislature back to the communities to come up with programs for the kids since they were moving them out of home. And we created some great programs, and this would decimate them. It just would, if she took that funding back, we would lose a lot of good programming in our county. So I would oppose both of those. I don't know if she's going to try that or make that move again this year, but that would hurt our county. The other three, B, C, D, and E, those were proposed from last year. B, they did give us more funding. They did it late in the year, and that's that $760,000. They did move money to Sedgwick County. All the districts got different pots of money for evidence-based programming. There was no movement on the state gaming revenues, and I noticed that Commissioner Cruz, I believe you have that expanding your gaming to support Sedgwick County. It's just the same pot of money. We used to get that in our detention fund. We used to get a little piece of that, and then they changed it. It's been changed 2 or 3 times now, but we no longer get it. And then residential center and adult intensive supervision, those have been flat funding for the last 20 years. And as you know, if flat funding does not mean, it really means a decrease in programming. As the costs go up, flat funding doesn't really support any additional programming or costs that we need to do. So we submitted a support letter to the Secretary of Department of Corrections through our Directors Board, Advisory Board, asking for more funding. That'll come from them to the state. And not knowing what's going to happen with the costs that are associated with COVID, I would strongly, I just don't see that we're going to get any additional funding. Certainly don't want to lose any, but I don't see us getting any additional funding this next year. So. Any questions?
Well, so maybe when we're talking about number 18, is there a way to, I mean, I don't want to push everything into one, but if we're talking about the gaming revenue and the Problem Gambling and Addictions Fund, partially for mental health, partially for juvenile services, is that right? Juvenile services?
Yes, and what I'll say is we used to get it several years ago, and then KDOC went in and has changed it now twice and made changes to how that money gets distributed. We are no longer getting it. So KDOC is using it in different ways, but it's not coming directly to the counties across the state. where it used to come to the detention, it was to help support detention facilities because some of them needed additional assistance. They weren't all full all the time, and so they supported based on the number of beds. Those programs, so they would give a little bit of that gaming fund to the county. And of course, what we saw is that food costs, other costs still increased. And so we asked them to switch that back, but they've never done that. And I don't know if that's, I don't even believe I think they're going to even propose something different this year. So I have not heard exactly what that is.
I don't want to convolute things. I mean, I don't want to put too much on the plate, but I think that between Glenda, what you're saying and mental health funding, I believe that maybe just the whole restructure of that needs to be completed.
I think it definitely needs to be reviewed, where that money is going and who it's going to, because when it was started, everything that was going on in our country looked a little bit differently, and how we were managing youth, even in our detention facilities. All that has changed with 367, and so I would just say it's time to take a really good look at where those monies are going. And I'm not opposed to it going to the mental health and to support addiction and to support some of the things that we are seeing here in Sedgwick County. But that was my proposal last year.
So as a sidebar, it seems like we have about a week to go over this. I wonder, Glenda and Joan and whoever else would like to, can we do a side meeting before next week, maybe to brainstorm about how we could word it, or if it's the will of the commission, obviously, to support this. But I feel like if that money is already out there and it's being allocated, we should really deep dive and figure out if we could get some of it allocated here in Sedgwick County as a very large state or a very large county in this state. Wouldn't it be okay if I had Lisa and Carol put something on the calendar with the three of us and whoever else wants to be involved?
Sure. Well, I'd love to be involved, but I am going to go on vacation starting tomorrow. But that doesn't mean I won't have somebody that I can have speak to this, whether Steve should be back pretty soon or one of my other deputy directors could help. But yeah, I think it's worth looking at. And like I said, the Department of Corrections has changed the streamline of that money several times, and it would be nice to know where it's all going, but it isn't going to detentions right now.
Can you shoot me a couple of names of who you'd like to have in your place?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you. And Joan, you nodded yes, so you're good. Okay. Thank you all.
If we're done with that issue, we could go on to the emergency communications issue. I know Laura has patiently been on this Zoom meeting and can explain why she wants to support legislation reclassifying through 911 communications dispatchers. Laura?
Thank you, Mr. Papoon. Good morning, commissioners. Can everybody hear me okay? Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. I always get worried on these Zoom calls. This is so preliminary that I'm even putting this up on your radar. So know that there's nothing that's actually in the works yet, but I would be remiss not to mention it to you, knowing that it may come up in this legislative session. The Kansas chapters of APCO and NENA, which are two professional organizations that represent 911 dispatchers internationally, are working on some legislation and getting some support for that for reclassification of 911 dispatchers as first responders. This is something that's been happening throughout the nation. If you've seen any of this on the news, I believe Colorado, California, several other states have done this, Texas. And so there's an effort here in Kansas to get that done. What that looks like is still up for debate and what's in question, and whether or not it even gets done this year is also in question still. I know one flavor of what this could look like is the Emergency Responder Act, which I believe is KSA 48949, for those that I know have their statutes memorized. Basically, though, that statute defines what a first responder is. And there is discussion about adding 911 dispatchers to that. And the goal of that would be is so that when we have things that come out specifically in relation to the coronavirus, that we are looped into that first responder definition for benefits or sometimes not benefits that go with that. So there was some ambiguity over the last year, for example, on leave that was allowed to be taken or not taken for kids out of school, for example, or first responder priority testing and things like that that have come up that were handled differently throughout the state for dispatch staff. We all know that 911 is essential personnel, and so to make sure that those team members are available to be at work, healthy, able to serve the public, to answer those 911 calls is, for us in our industry, of course, an utmost priority. So looking ahead at possibly looping us into that definition so that, for example, if vaccinations come out that are available to first responders, then dispatchers would be eligible for that to keep them healthy and here answering phones. There was some discussion, just to let you know, about having training standards involved in that, some opportunity for KP&F retirement, things like that. And that right now, I don't think is getting any traction. I would not foresee seeing that in any legislation that would go forward this year. Some of those unfunded mandates are not popular, of course, and there's not anybody, I think, in the legislature that's wanting to author a bill that would have that in there. So I wouldn't expect to see that. If there is anything that comes to fruition, what I would expect to see is just us looped into that definition to better define our role within the system. Any questions? Thank you.
Wait, hey, Laura, this is Pete. I kind of hear what you're saying, but so does it, if this just is a simple title change, it just helps with their benefits? Is that what you're saying? And it helps with their classification for employment benefits? Or
it would help at the very least. I think the goal this year is to help to ensure that dispatchers are included in those first responder criteria for certain, like I said, sometimes it's for benefits and sometimes it's to our detriment. But for clarity, in how we manage those teams in relation to things that are or not available related to coronavirus, which felt like a very muddy answer to that. But like I said, the example of vaccinations, and if we say that, okay, we have these vaccinations that are available for first responders, right now it would be up to the jurisdictions locally to define whether or not that would be inclusive of 911 staff or not. And so wanting to have some uniformity throughout the state and some clarity on where 911 falls within that realm.
so this isn't something we can just resolve internally in our county with our own HR departments?
Well, internally in our county, we do treat 911 staff as first responders as far as what we refer to them as.
Okay.
We are not in the same pay sphere as our other first responders, and we are not. So in that way, we're not kind of in that same ball game, but we do, of course, our health department has treated them as first responders as far as testing and test results. And we are very good to our 911 staff in the way we handle it here locally, which is why Sedgwick County is not a big pushing agent in this reclassification effort. I am a part of these organizations, APCO and NINA, so available or involved in those discussions, but I would not consider us a big champion. But if this were to come out, I would also not want us to be an opponent to it.
Okay, well, my briefest history here is that I think the commission and the county is very supportive of our 911, of you and the agents, the 911 agents. So I'm glad that you're kind of clarifying that we are we are taken care of in a positive way. And I guess if we need to weigh in on this statewide, we can, but we're already doing it. So
Right. And that's why, again, it's just putting it on your radar should it come up or come across. I don't even know that it's going to come across your radar, but yes, right now the current climate in Sedgwick County is very favorable to our staff and has been for years.
Okay. Well, thanks, Elora. Because that was an area that I was really in the unknown about. So thanks for explaining.
Yeah.
Okay, Mike, we can move on.
Okay. Next item is, and this was an item that was on our other important issues section last year, and it was to expand gaming in Sedgwick County through either sports gaming or otherwise, and allow that a portion of those revenues go to behavioral health needs. And I just want to see if the commission's still interested in having this item on some portion of our platform for next year.
Well, I'm okay if we keep it on or take it off. Obviously, the Native American nation is doing whatever they want to do anyway. So we're having expanded gaming to an extent in Sedgwick County, of which we as the county and the state are not receiving any fees off of. But there again, we asked the Attorney General to just send a decision up to the Supreme Court, and that's been waffling around. So in our lifetime, I think when 2032 comes, and that expires, I think it'll just be wide open, Wild West. So we could get proactive ahead of time, or the state-sponsored gambling of 25 years can expire in 2032, and it'll be worried about then, which is, I think, what Attorney General Derek Schmidt wants to do. So it's up to the commission. We can, similar to some others, we can decide if we want to keep it on there or not. It's okay.
Yeah, you can certainly weigh in as the session goes along. I haven't heard anything. I don't know if any of if Jim or any of the other former legislators have heard anything. I know Iowa has expanded gaming to allow sports gaming. I don't know if there's a movement in Kansas to generate revenues with sports gaming or not. Obviously, to position that we can expand on or support at a later date if the commission doesn't want to at this time.
Okay. Well, the option is I think our representative up there in Topeka, our lobbyist, he's paying attention to that a lot as well. So maybe we can, I'm okay if we want to, we're not making decisions, but as long as we're in touch with the current status and where it's going. I would hate for something to happen and we have a chance to get a piece of the gaming issue and it gets out of control like it did down south there. So anyway.
I think in light of how many items we have to consider, and this necessarily isn't a topic of heated discussion this year. I think taking it off would be appropriate.
Yeah.
I would prefer to take it off the list.
Okay, we can make that final decision next week unless the chairman wants to remove it beforehand. But the next one is a position we took on domestic violence. I think this was an issue brought forward by Commissioner Cruz. But that's the language we had on last year's platform. I don't know of any specific bills addressing this at this time, but I don't know, Commissioner Cruz, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that I'll just need to refresh myself. But I think that given light, just last night at my Citizens Advisory Board, we had Amanda Myers with the Wichita Family Crisis Center. And I do believe that with domestic violence rates increasing, I think it's important to explore any options to help with domestic violence. I think this is first offenders to participate in the Kansas Batterer Prevention Program. I believe that offenders had to offend a couple of times before they were scheduled to participate in this Kansas Batterer Prevention Program. So I think this is relating to if someone has a domestic violence charge, they would have to participate their first offense in this Batterer program. I think that makes sense. I mean, if you're charged with domestic violence, to try to rectify the situation and not have you offend again, to take a program. But again, I think that it's important that it's a funded program. To Laura's point earlier, we don't want unfunded mandates. We already know that there's enough constraints on our budget as it is right now.
Well, I think it's certainly a position we may also need to run by the city of Wichita, because their input on this issue would be significant, since they have to deal with all the domestic violence cases in our city. So I'll be happy to touch base with them to see what they might think of this as well.
Thank you.
Number 15, the sheriff asked to go ahead and remove that. It was on last year. He doesn't think that their organizations looked at this, and he doesn't think it's a significant issue for them at this point. So we're going to remove 15. Scrap metal database, number 16. I talked to both the sheriff and district attorney. I think the sheriff didn't think it's much of an issue at this time. Marc Bennett thought that it could be an issue if scrap metal prices go up. They are generally in favor of funding the Attorney General's office to adequately maintain this database and oversee scrap metal theft throughout the state. But he realistically, I think, understands that with the state funding situation, that it's unlikely that probably a lot of money is going to be going to this. But it's generally just a generic statement to support it if the state has the money, I guess. I don't know if the commission has a strong feeling about this issue or not. Okay. We can chew on that for a week. Yeah. Loan forgiveness, this is something that ComCare and I think Mr. Kaufman brought up last year. Some sort of a student loan forgiveness program. I think there may have been something similar to this done in Texas, whereby Sedgwick County, as an underserved area, could recruit employees with student loans and have some of those loans forgiven for working at ComCare. I don't know if Joan, you want to talk about this?
Joan, you're on mute.
There are a lot of advantages provided to, like, the FQHCs in town and other places that treat the underserved, which of course is our primary population, because they have federal opportunity for loan forgiveness. But as a community mental health center, we are not in what's called a designated healthcare shortage area, because we have the VA hospital that pumps up the numbers for Sedgwick County. So we would need some legislation that would align community mental health centers with other not underserved populations, like the FQHCs, in order to get the opportunity for loan forgiveness. I mean, when you're talking about $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 loans, a $2 pay increase gets people moving out of our system quicker than we want them to. They just can't stay and shoulder the burden of their school loans. So really a vital piece in recruitment and retention.
How many people do you have any numbers around how many people we lose, that we initially hire and then, or we don't have an opportunity to hire because, they're in our candidate pool, but they then take a position with, some of the FQHCs? Do you have any info around that?
Well, we've lost 7 to 8 people to the FQACs. We lose them everywhere, Lacey. We've had 22 resignations of our licensed clinicians since March, and they're all leaving for other opportunities in town that pay better. So we had one that started for a week, got an offer, and left after a week. We've have others that just recently left that have been here 16 years and can't afford to stay at their pay grade for the rest of their lives. So it's a major issue, but everybody that comes to us new has loan debt.
Any more discussion on this? Go to the last item on the platform issues that I'm bringing forward to you today, and that is, and this was an issue, again, brought to the forefront by Commissioner Cruz, which is taking the problem gaming and addictions grant fund expenditures and moving them into some programs in Sedgwick County, I think for behavioral health or addiction in Sedgwick County. I will, and I think Commissioner Cruz may already have this, but I will get to all of you. Yesterday when I was doing some research on this issue, I found a legislative post audit that was completed in April of 2018 that addresses this issue, and that will give you some background information. But I think what has happened is they were generating about $7.4 million, I believe, a year, and those funds were just kind of swept into KDADs and swept into some other state programs. So it essentially would be competing with some state funding issues as well. But clearly the money isn't going to where it was intended in the first place, or specifically intended in the first place. But whether we can get our hands on some of this or not, but this legislative post audit will give all of you at least a better understanding of how this fund was created, how much revenue it brought in, and where it's being used now. So, Commissioner Cruz?
No, I think I've exhausted all of my concerns or ideas around this, and I look forward to having the conversation with Joan and someone. And I had worked last year with Representative Bishop, so she has been kind of working on this as well, and she's also working on the loan forgiveness. So, working with her on a couple of different things. So we'll get it figured out.
Well, that's all I have.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Mike, and for reviewing all those. So, and thanks for everybody's comment. So, Tom, we've got another item, I believe.
Yep. I'm seeing Courtney on the phone here. I don't know if he's going to present that or if Chris is coming back on, or maybe in the room. And it looks like maybe Chris is in the room. But it's the National Electric Code update, Chairman. I think they're adopting the new code, and Chris wanted to go through the highlights, I think.
All right, good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, and Mr. Schultz. Thank you for that, sir. Yes, Chris Labram, MABCD. We have a public hearing set for December 2nd for this code. I do not expect that we'll have a lot of input at that, given the input that's been in the adoption, and there's no opposition to this that I'm aware of. So we are looking to implement this beginning January 1st. So interestingly enough, the electrical community, especially the stakeholders that you'll see in the slides, had been working this they had begun working this in 19, and of course were interrupted by COVID. Once they were able to get back together, a combo of virtually and in person, and get it going again, they were able to catch up with their timeline, if you will. And given the amount of preparation that the industry had already begun, We're actually, I mean, when you talk about kind of good problems to have, the industry is pushing us to go ahead and go with the adoption because they're ready for it. So it's a little bit of an administrative scramble on our part, but it's because we're trying to catch up with where where industry stakeholders, inspectors all want us to be. So I'll take that. A few administrative notes here. So this is Article 4 of the Unified Building and Trade Code. Always two parts to our adoptions. It includes the updated code as well as any local amendments that we include. This code, it's a national code, not an international code. International doesn't work with electricity the way it's done so differently in other countries. So this nests with the ICC codes we use, but it does not originate or come from them. Several related national organizations, engineering and others that play into this. We'll see a few of those as we go forward as well. And the codes are revised every 3 years to remain current with the changing industry. We've had some discussion with you all and others, obviously, as far as adoption cycle. We're finding that it still works very well to do our building codes, those that affect structures in the actual building, every 6 years. We don't see them change as rapidly, and that gives us a chance to, on a 3-year cycle, evaluate those, and then we can make any minor tweaks just through our UBTC that we may want to then. We had talked about that with the trades codes. However, we see that based on rapidly changing technology, the amount of changes, additions, tweaks that come with these codes, we need to stay on a 3-year adoption cycle in order to keep up with that. So that's what we're doing here. This code particularly had just over 1,400 changes made. Of course, most of those, the vast majority of those, are administrative, just clarifying wording, cleaning things up so it's easier to understand and to use. So here's a list of our other codes that this is coordinated across. Again, this includes some national agencies or reference to those, such as National Fire Protection Agency and some of those. So if those standards are utilized, they're referenced in the code. Latest adoption of this was done of the NEC, I should say, was done in 2017, and that was the 2017 code with 27 amendments. Going to the 2020, we jumped up to 34 amendments. Some of those we'll cover here, and that's also because we've included some things, a little bit of a new concept here for some future adoption or exclusion. And then previously we'd excluded 12 items from the code. This time we're excluding 7, so meaning that 5 now have been, most of those with an amendment, but 5 baseline code items are now being utilized or will be utilized by our industry here. On the usage of the code, so of course this covers our jurisdiction that we always like to remind everyone of, that those who contract with us and use our code across Sedgwick County takes them into account. And again, very pleased with the cooperative effort that we've seen here, the staff and the industry support and working together on this. So when we discussed that, and I also brought up the issue of some future compliance dates. So that's one thing that you'll see when we give some examples of amendments, that there are some areas where if we compare this to last year's made item, which was the arc fault protection. Arc fault had been in the code in one form or another for 19 years when we fully adopted it to the level we have here. Again, fully adopted the baseline code there. There have been some incidents, safety incidents that resulted in additions to the code. We do not see them as maybe as necessary right now. And we also do not see that we would like to see some more testing, some more usage of those. So the community has projected those in the code for adoption. This gives us full allowance to use them and gives all the criteria by which we would inspect, etc., and work with those items. And then it projects that we'll adopt those in the next code cycle, but still leaves the door open to either amend or even exclude those in the future if it does not go the way that we hope and plan it will. So again, I thought that was a very innovative approach by our Board of Electrical Appeals. So I commend them for that. We haven't, as you've noticed, haven't had any major safety or management issues with the code, and we do see that our amendments, even though there are quite a few, they are relatively minimal. This gives insight on the groups involved in the adoption. Obviously, the BEA leading most of that. The National Electrical Contractors Association, that included the local chapter of the Electrical Brotherhood here, so the union side of the contractors, and that includes the schoolhouse, their apprentice and journeyman training. And then the independent electrical contractors, that includes the Association of Independents as well as also their training center. Had both fire departments involved. We thank them for that, and then several electrical suppliers involved, which again is always very, very important. Wichita Area Builders Association also was a part of that. Now, I do need to caveat that a little bit, that with the recent exposures, both on their side and ours, we had to interrupt our last few meetings. So we will finish those meetings later this week and at the beginning of next. But we have had the initial discussions, and to my knowledge, no major issues. We're all on board with where we're going. Do have two items that will somewhat substantially change practices of contractors. And those impact residential homes, mainly new homes. So a few examples of these that I'll point out, and the first two are examples of, again, the future adoption dates. So in this case, 200-volt outlets currently, those are required to be on their own circuit breaker. That's the main protection we have. The new code has added that those would be also ground fault circuit interrupter protected. Ground fault is designed to protect the person so that you don't become the ground and thereby become electrocuted. Again, we are not aware, we know that there have been nationally some instances where that's occurred with major appliances, which obviously drives this, but very minimal. We're not really aware of any in our local area that have ever occurred. And so, and we're also, again, I reference kind of back to arc fault, how we gave that a long time for the equipment and the lab testing and all of that to catch up. We're not yet convinced that that's happened here. So contractors will have the option to use this. Purchasers would have the option to use this, would have all the criteria by which to inspect it, to qualify it, etc. But we will not require it. Very similar with air conditioning units. Baseline code has added also GFCI to those. Same spiel here. Currently, your air conditioner is protected by a separate fuse that's located outside of the dwelling with the unit. And so again, we're happy to let those who would like that extra protection use it. We'll have all the criteria in place for it, but we won't require it. If we find that the industry and nationally there is a need and we don't have a lot of extra expense or issues, etc., and that it adds what we would, again, consider a reasonable safety factor, then it would be queued up for adoption in the next cycle. Here is one that we excluded. Again, an example of an exclusion. So surge protection for the overall circuit panel on a home. So this would be very similar to the surge protector, just a big version of the surge protector that you have on your computer there. It would, so in the event of a utility surge, which would be the most likely scenario, potentially a lower level static discharge. I don't think this would exactly hold up to a lightning strike, but if you got that energy surge, it would be able to dampen that and protect your appliances, if you will. So obviously the design behind this comes in with high-level electronics that so many have now. So where our evaluation of this, and again, it's the reason I give these details is it follows the pattern that we use when evaluating our exclusions and things that we amend to be less restrictive than the code, is we look at this and say it's not designed to protect a person. So there is not a physical safety aspect there. It is certainly a great thing for those who would want to use it, so we would permit it, obviously, but we are certainly not going to require it because, again, it's protecting appliances. I can also compare this to the arc fault that we adopted last year. That's designed to protect the wiring and prevent fire. So then again, though secondary to that is the human protection, but that's the line of, just wanted to explain that as the line of rationale that we follow in these amendments and, again, exclusions. So the last two that we have are examples of our little bit more major, at least this will be a little bit more of a substantial change to the industry. So currently, we have an amendment in the code that allows the service disconnect, and that would be utilized obviously in an emergency, either by a homeowner or normally by first responders. Right now, those can be located inside the home, and they can actually be up to 15 feet away from the service entry in the home. This would require that anytime that on a new home or a service upgrade, so a remodel of a home or work in a home that does not change the electrical service will not have any impact on this. But if the electrical service is changed, it would require that disconnect to then be placed on the outside of the home. So this one does come with a cost, depending on the type of box and connector used. Basically, a few $100s per home is going to be added to the cost here. Now, a few things with that. Currently, one reason our code is in place is the our amendment is in place based on the energy providers' boxes that they use, the meter enclosures. So currently, you are able to receive one of those for free as well, and that is being discontinued by Evergy. So the Evergy boxes, one, will no longer be free. That will be an increased cost, and their boxes will also include this. So we're going to be push that or going that direction regardless. We feel it better to go ahead and get out in front of it and manage it through our code. So we have included that as a requirement. And then also goes without saying, while we don't want to overdo it, but this is a big thing for first responders and a big thing for firefighters, that they would not have to go inside a home that has the disconnect on the outside. Most
Hey, Chris?
of them. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
Can you, so you say that Evergy was providing these and now they're going to, the cost will increase. Can you speak to that a little bit? Just talk about that again.
So so currently that meter enclosure, if someone were to elect that, they just issue that enclosure, but it's a very basic enclosure. So then it would be up to the builder to, and of course the purchaser to decide where the service disconnect is placed, and we do allow it currently to be placed inside the home if that's what they would elect to do. So depending on, and I know Mr. Nordic was having some connection issues, but he may be on the line, back on the line, and able to speak to that a little more. Depending on the type of box or the type of disconnect used, it is a cost of $150 to I think about $260. So at least a portion of that cost is going to be sent to builders and homeowners anyway, based on again Evergy and the service providers changes. Does that answer your question, Commissioner?
Yeah. So people who currently have, no, okay, never mind.
But and if in a current situation, this would only apply if you change your electrical service. So, for example, if you were on a 100 amp service now, you upgraded that to a 200 amp. then it would, when installing all of the new wiring, the circuit panel, the everything that goes with that, that would then result in the box or the disconnect needing to be moved to the outside of the home if it's not already there. But in most cases of a remodel, it would not affect, this would not have an effect.
Okay, so how many people are we talking in our community that could be affected by this increase?
Everyone who builds a new home.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yeah, and we include usually Andover in the numbers. So when right now we're building about 1,000 homes a year. And then lastly is very similar. So all the same spiel goes with this one. This would just apply to those who have an emergency power generator outside of the home. So again, if that's installed, or if one is currently there and a service upgrade was completed, or if one is installed, then it would also require that disconnect on the exterior. And I certainly don't want to downplay what a benefit that is for safety and for first responders, because again, if they are able to locate that quickly and before they have to enter a home, that obviously is a huge safety factor to be able to disconnect that. To my knowledge, again, most new homes that are being built are going to have this anyway. This again just requires it. Are there any other questions or other items that you all would like us to cover a little more in depth?
Yeah, this is Jim Howell. I've got one question. Have we been talking to the builders to get their input on this?
Yes, sir.
And do they have an opinion on any of this that we ought to hear about?
Right now, we're in concurrence. Obviously, there was similar questions to those that you had asked through WABA. So we have discussed that service disconnect is the main discussion there with them. But again, they're aware that Evergy is changing the policy, and they are in agreement with us moving forward with this.
On the service disconnect, they have the ability to cut that service power on every home right now by pulling the meter. Is that correct?
Chris, can I get you on to speak to that? Make sure that we have that properly stated.
Yes, this is Chris Nordick. Yes, they do have the ability to pull the meter out of the enclosure. However, again, that line side of the meter is hot, and the fire department is waiting for the utility company to show up to the property to pull that meter. So to have that disconnecting means readily available for the first responders is a big step in the right direction.
So the firefighter can't cut the wire and open the enclosure and pull the meter. They don't do that as a firefighter?
Nope. They actually call the utility company and wait for the utility to come and make it safe.
Is that the practice everywhere, or is that something we just do here?
Well, that's pretty much the practice within the city limits now. Out in unincorporated areas of Sedgwick County, most of the time the disconnecting means is remote. It's already out on a pole at the start of the property when the properties are large enough. So you have that disconnecting means that's already available at the property in the unincorporated areas on large lots, but within the city limits. Basically what you have is the meter and the unfused conductors entering the structure. So they're sitting around waiting. They're trying to fight as much fire as they can from the outside while they're waiting for the utility to come and disconnect that meter enclosure.
So in terms of, someone doing something they should not get involved in, the homeowner or child, teenager, someone messing with that? Is there what type of tamper-proof provisions are on that so someone doesn't do this to mess with other people? I just think this is an opportunity potentially. So what tamper-proof things are on there so that only the firefighters would do this?
Yeah, actually, the enclosures are designed with means for locking, so the customer actually owns that, meter main disconnect enclosure, that combination enclosure, and they are allowed to install their padlocks on that, lock it out with their own lock. So the firefighter will be able to come and actually cut that lock, and without entering live bus, be able to shut that main off.
If someone wants to retrofit their existing home and add this disconnect, they're willing to pay for it. Is that something Evergy will support with their side to allow that to be installed?
Absolutely.
Does Evergy charge money for that service to allow that to be installed, other than the electrician's cost to install that and the labor and materials? Is that the only cost that there would be?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, are there any other questions? Chris, thanks again for your presentation. This will be coming in front of us for approval next meeting?
On the 2nd of December, sir.
2nd of December, okay.
Yes, sir, and that
It
will
has to
be,
be done over at the city as well.
yes, so we're scheduled 8 December at the city.
Okay.
If, obviously, if there are any other questions, I know you have these documents in email. We also left a packet on each of your desks today. If you have any other questions, obviously, please contact me, and we would be happy to set up a further meeting and discuss in further detail.
All right.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you.
Chairman, that is all we had from staff today.
Okay, Tom, thanks. Anybody else got anything to add? Being none, we will adjourn this meeting and see you later on this afternoon.